It was cold out that night, just past 2:30 a.m., middle of January 2019, deep in the Roseland section on Chicago's far south side. Somebody heard gunshots, not one or two, but a full clip let off in the dark. By the time folks looked out their windows, a white pickup had peeled off down South Eberhart, and all that was left behind was a girl in a hoodie, bleeding out alone. She wasn't a rapper, she didn't tote guns on camera, but her face was known around 63rd. She hung with FBG Duck, with Wooski, with STL. And when news dropped, Instagram, YouTube, and The Block said the same thing. Backdoor Queen got backdoored. Some people said she knew too much, while others said she moved wrong. Nobody knows who pulled the trigger, but everybody remembers the story. This ain't just about Ambry. It's about a street war, a city with no brakes, and the way rumors hit harder than bullets. To really understand how a girl like Ambriana Collins ended up with a title like Backdoor Queen, you gotta go back decades, not just a few years, and definitely not just a Facebook post or YouTube clips. You gotta start with the South Side itself, a whole system that was rigged from the jump, where red lines on a map decided who would rise and who would rot. Back in the early 1900s, a flood of black families moved up from Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, running from Jim Crow laws and sharecropper wages. They came to Chicago chasing work in steel mills and rail yards, but what they got instead was a box. Politicians, banks, and real estate folks threw a wall around a narrow stretch of the South Side and called it the Black Belt. You had neighborhoods like Bronzeville, Woodlawn, and Inglewood stacked up with families living on top of each other, buildings falling apart, kids packed into classrooms with no heat, and barely any jobs left when the factories shut down. And when black folks tried to move outside that line, white mobs showed up with bricks, bats, and fire. The banks didn't help either. Redlining maps marked whole zip codes as unlendable. Just because black families lived there, that meant no loans, no home repairs, no grocery stores, no investment, just rot. So when things started breaking down and kids had no after-school programs, no jobs, and no future on paper, they built their own structures. That's how the gangs came in. The gangster disciples and black disciples weren't just cliques at first. They came out of something bigger, more organized. GDs go back to Larry Hoover, a kid from Mississippi who ran wild in Inglewood before putting together a street empire in the late 60s. He and his guys created ranks, codes, even community programs at one point. He wanted power, not chaos. The BDs came from David Barksdale, who was holding down the devil's disciples before flipping it to black disciples. These weren't just crews fighting for corners, they were full systems, deep into politics, prison links, and the drug trade. By the 80s and early 90s, Hoover had turned the GDs into a machine. He had lieutenants in every neighborhood, running money, running missions, and reporting back even while he sat in a cell. It was structured like a company, with secretaries, enforcers, finance heads, and even education coordinators. But when the feds hit him with a life sentence and started cracking down with the RICO charges, the whole thing started breaking apart. What came next was chaos. Without that top-down leadership, the gangs splintered into sets, then micro sets, then block crews. And that's where names like STL, Jarrow City, and O Block start to mean something. That's where Tocqueville was born. STL EBT came up around 63rd and St. Lawrence, a GD set that got known in the early 2010s. They were deep in Woodlawn, rolling with names like FBG Duck, KI, and later Ambry. Across King Drive, in the Parkway Gardens complex, the BDs had set up shop. Now, Parkway Gardens didn't start out as no war zone. It was built in the mid-50s as a co-op project, one of the first for black residents. Michelle Obama lived there as a kid. The buildings had modern kitchens, heating systems, gardens, even security. But by the time the 70s hit, HUD had taken over. By the 80s and 90s, it was falling apart. When the Chicago Housing Authority started tearing down nearby projects like the Randolph Towers, BD members who had been living there started moving into Parkway Gardens. That's how O Block formed, not out of a plan, but out of pressure. They pushed STL EBT out and the beef kicked off for real. The tipping point came in 2011 when Shondale Tuka Gregory, a 15-year-old STL member, got shot at a bus stop. Folks from O Block and TYMB were blamed. Tuka was just a kid, but his name became legend. STL renamed themselves Tocqueville in his honor. The streets never forgot. Later that same year, BD member Odie Perry was gunned down, reportedly by a young girl named Kakira K.I. Barnes from STL. In response, the BDs renamed the 6400 block of King Drive to O Block in Odie's memory. O Block in Odie's memory. That name stuck too. What started as payback became permanent. This back and forth wasn't just about bullets. It was about names, memory, respect. You kill one of ours, we rename the block after him. You diss one of ours, we drop a track, then double back. By the time 2013 came around, STL and O Block were at war like it was generational. Every shooting added to the score. And even if you wasn't a shooter, just standing on the wrong block could make you a target. That's how people like Ambry got caught in the storm. She wasn't hitting licks, but she was close to people who were. And in this city, proximity is guilt enough. So when people throw out terms like Backdoor Queen, what they're really doing is mixing up one girl's life with the sins of a whole city. A whole history of betrayal, retaliation, and misunderstanding. But the seeds of that myth weren't planted on social media. They were planted in the dirt of segregation, in the bricks of Parkway Gardens, and in the bodies left on 63rd. That's why Chicago ain't just another city with gang beef. It's a place where even the street names carry bloodlines. It's a place where housing policy created war zones and forced enemies to live across the street. And once that happens, all it takes is one rumor to make you a suspect, one Facebook post to make you a target. This is where Ambry grew up, not just in a neighborhood, but in a war story with no ending. And once you understand how Chicago got like this, you start to see why sometimes the truth don't matter as much as the name people put on you. Ambriana Collins came into the world on March 18, 1994, born right in the middle of Chicago's South Side, near a pocket known to locals as Gyro City, just a few blocks off 63rd and St. Lawrence, deep in the heart of STL EBT territory. Back then, the name Gyro City didn't just mean greasy takeout spots or corner stores bumping music all night. It meant gang ties, block loyalty, and being raised in a neighborhood where every face had a story and every street had a code. She was the type of girl who got respect early, not because she was out there catching bodies or posting up with guns, but because her name rang for different reasons. Reasons that had more to do with how she moved, how she spoke, and how she carried herself when things got wild. Ambry rolled with a tight circle, and if you knew anything about STL back then, you knew these names carried weight. Fredio, Side, Motor, and Can't Get Right. They weren't just her friends, they were like her brothers. All of them out the same trenches, tied in by loyalty, struggle, and neighborhood roots that ran deeper than rap. Around her way, people said she was loud but never corny, bold but not reckless, and funny as hell when she wanted to be, cracking jokes in front of gas stations, sidestepping drama with one-liners, and making even the quietest dudes laugh when she came around. Girls in the area gravitated toward her because she stood on her own, never needed to play small to get love, and never switched up when it got rough. The guys gave her a nickname that stuck. They called her Gangsta, not because she was doing dirt, but because she handled pressure without folding, stood next to her people when it mattered, and never ducked the smoke when things got real. The thing about Ambry that most folks don't get is she wasn't some cold-hearted savage, and she wasn't a saint either. She was a real one. She came up in a place where being loyal wasn't just a saying, it was the currency of survival. And once you showed you had your people's back, they returned that love tenfold. That's how Ambry moved. If one of hers got locked up, she'd be the first to post their name on Facebook with free tags. If one of hers got hit, she'd be the one writing long posts that came straight from the chest, tagging 10 names, sending voice notes, and saying she just wanted peace but wasn't gonna let nobody play her people. Gyro City made her tough, but it didn't make her cold. She was still that girl who took photos with her friends in front of the brick walls, tagged with names of dead homies. Still the one smiling with her head tilted, hoop earrings swinging, and hair laid down just right for the day. Her laugh used to ring down the block, even on days when the sky looked like it was holding something ugly. She didn't rap, but she stood behind the ones who did. She didn't shoot, but she rode for the ones who did. That blurred line between being in the life and just loving the people who were. That's the line Ambry walked every day. And in neighborhoods like hers, that line is real thin, almost invisible sometimes. And when the bodies start dropping, folks stop looking at who pulled the trigger and start pointing fingers at whoever stood nearby. Still, in the middle of all that, Ambry stayed the same. She wasn't perfect. She could be hot-headed. She could post stuff that stirred the pot. She had moments where she clapped back too hard on Facebook comments. But at the end of the day, everybody who really knew her said the same thing. She was solid, and she didn't switch up. Long before folks on the internet gave her a nickname like Backdoor Queen, before the whispers started about who she talked to or who she was seen around, Ambry was just a Southside girl trying to find her space. holding it down for her son, showing up at video shoots for her people, and making sure her name meant something more than gossip. In her world, that was all you could do. Every block got girls like her, the ones who are present in every photo, every party, every late-night gas station run, the ones who hold the lighters, guard the purses, pull up to bond court, call everybody bro, and don't let nobody play in their face. Ambry was that girl. And to the people who stood next to her at cookouts, who took selfies with her under murals, who let her crash at their crib when things got tough, she wasn't no setup girl, she was family. But like most things in Chicago, once your name starts ringing outside your own circle, it don't belong to you no more. It starts to belong to the block, to the ops, to the blogs, to people who never met you but got something to say. That shift hadn't fully happened yet, but it was creeping in, and Ambry didn't even know it. She was just living the only way she knew how, close to the edge but 10 toes down, part of the crew but not part of the dirt, loyal to the last breath, and never acting like she was better than the city that raised her. By late 2013, Ambriana Collins had already built her name on the block, not just for being the funny one or the loyal one, but for holding it down in a way that didn't need to scream. Around that time, she met a dude named Teddy Gage, someone who wasn't from STL EBT, but got embraced anyway because of the way he carried himself. Teddy wasn't loud or flashy. He didn't rap or throw up gang signs in pictures. He was quiet, calm, solid, and he moved like he understood what loyalty meant in a place where that word got tested daily. Ambry fell for him quick, not on no puppy love type time, but in that deep private way where she didn't even say too much about it to everybody, she just let her actions show. When they were together, folks said she smiled different, talked softer, and laughed like she had finally let her guard down. It was the kind of relationship where she didn't have to play tough because she trusted that Teddy would. On June 5th, 2014, Ambry gave birth to a baby boy they named Angelo. That little boy became her whole world. She used to call him her little broke best friend in Facebook captions, joking about how he stole her sleep, her money, and her last nerve, but also how he gave her a reason to push through every single day. Pictures of her holding him in the hospital bed circulated through her circle, and everybody who saw it said the same thing. She looked like she found purpose. Being a mom in Giro City wasn't easy, and she knew that from day one. She still hung around her people, still popped out to shows and block parties, still posted up outside gas stations laughing with Fredio, Side, and Motor. But everything about her shifted once Lolo came into the picture. She moved different, talked about getting out more often, and started saying things like she couldn't afford to go to jail, not even overnight, because she had someone depending on her now. Teddy stayed involved in Angelo's life too, even when they wasn't together like they used to be. He showed up, helped out, and from everything people close to them said, he really loved that kid with his whole heart. But life in that part of the city doesn't hand out easy breaks, and by 2018, things took a heavy turn. Teddy got sick, real sick, the kind of sick that doesn't look loud or dramatic, but slow and mean, the kind that creeps in through hospital visits and missed calls. In April 2018, Teddy passed away after battling cancer, and Ambry was devastated in a way that didn't always show on the surface, but bled through in the way she spoke, in the way she typed her status updates, in the way she would zone out mid-convo with her people. She still showed up for her son, still posted her usual jokes and quotes, but her friends said you could see the change in her energy. She would sit longer with her headphones in, stare off more often, and every once in a while, she'd post things like, "You smiling baby," with a picture of Teddy, or "This city so cold, but I gotta stay warm for Lolo." That same month, Ambry picked up 2 jobs, one at Popeyes, one at McDonald's. That girl was waking up early for one shift, getting home in time to catch a nap, and heading back out for the second. Both restaurants were down on 103rd Street, not exactly around the corner from STL territory, so she spent a lot of time on the bus, tired but focused. She was trying to hold everything together with greasy uniforms, bus transfers, and late-night feeds, all while raising a 4-year-old who just lost his father. But grief doesn't knock once in places like this. It keeps spinning the block. On June 15th, 2018, Tori Can't Get Right Carpenter, one of Ambry's closest friends from STL, got shot outside a chicken spot on East 63rd. They said it was a quick hit, no warning, just shots fired and people running. The thing about Get Right was that he had just started getting his life in order, trying to stay out the way. But the streets don't really care about redemption arcs. Ambry wrote a long post that night, barely punctuated, raw and honest, talking about how she hadn't seen him for a week and now she never would again. how they used to joke every day, how everything felt different now. Her people said she didn't come outside much after that for a while, not because she was scared, but because the loss was stacking too fast. Still, she stayed strong for her son, still clocked into work, still checked in on her friends, but the wear was showing. She was losing people faster than she could grieve, and you could see that weight in her face, in the bags under her eyes, in the tone of her voice when she said she was fine, but didn't mean it. Then January 3rd, 2019 hit, and with it came the killing of 2 more friends, Motor inside in broad daylight, Lolo gas station on 51st in Indiana, bullets flying, bodies dropping, no time to scream. Motor was Ambry's guy, not on no dating level, but real bond, real memories, the type you build when y'all been through hard times together and still laughed. She went on Facebook again, this time writing like she was begging heaven to stop taking her people. "Motor, you know better than this. We move different," she wrote. And then she shouted out Rappy G, saying he wasn't innocent, but he was real. He was smooth, and he was loving, and now they were both gone. In the post, she mentioned Teddy again, calling him the only one who ever really saw her. And by the end of that message, it was clear to anybody reading that Ambry was tired, not just physically, but in her soul. 3 deaths in 8 months, 1 child at home, 2 jobs, and whispers starting to float around about who was setting who up. It was a lot for anybody to carry, and Ambry was carrying it all alone, but she didn't stop showing up, didn't stop fighting, didn't stop posting RIPs for the people she loved. She had already buried a partner, lost 3 of her closest friends, and was holding down a son with no father, all before her 25th birthday. By that point, everybody could see it. She was still Ambry, still with the quick comebacks and the sharp tongue, still showing love to STL and FBG Duck, but she looked haunted now, like somebody who kept standing in the same storm hoping the rain would finally miss her just once. And behind every joke, behind every selfie, behind every RIP post, there was this question floating in the air, silent but heavy. Who's next, and will I be ready? By the time Ambry was juggling work shifts and posting RIPs every other month, the city around her had already shifted into something new, something louder, something that made everything feel more exposed. And that something was drill music, which didn't just come out of Chicago, it came straight from the blocks that were already soaked in history, pain, and smoke. Drill wasn't about lyrics for lyrics' sake, it was born out the war, out the dead friends, the disc sets, the unsolved cases, and the long stares between parked cars. Chief Keef kicked that door wide open in 2012 with I Don't Like, but he wasn't just another rapper trying to make it. He was O-Block, real name Keith Cozart, and everything about him felt like the city finally had a mouthpiece. His beats were cold and empty, his delivery was raw and spaced out, and his lyrics didn't just hint at violence, they spelled it out, line by line. Keef had ties to BD sets, mostly through O-Block, and that loyalty ran deep, even before the fame hit. Right behind him came Lil Durk, repping Lamron, Normal, spelled backward, another BD-leaning set that linked heavy with Parkway Gardens and the same wave Keef rode. Durk was more melodic, more polished over time, but he still carried that street edge, and when he spoke on names like Nusky or Vaughn, it wasn't for show. Then came King Von, born Davon Bennett, who didn't just rap about the streets, he was raised by them, charged with bodies before his first studio album even dropped, and known to be posted outside Parkway with a smirk like nothing could touch him. O-Block wasn't just in the lyrics, it became the brand, the label, the tagline, the backdrop in music videos that hit 1 million views before the second verse. And all that visibility didn't just build careers, it put real targets on people, and it turned names into street chess pieces. On the other side of the war, you had STL, EBT, and the Flyboy Gang, more commonly known as FBG. At the front of that crew was Carlton Weekly, known to most as FBG Duck. Duck wasn't trying to play background, he was a voice for his side, dropping tracks like Slide in 2018 that hit charts and shook rooms. He didn't dodge the beef either, calling out dead BDs by name in songs like Dead Bitches, where he mocked Odie Perry and T-Roy, knowing full well the type of reactions that would bring. Then there was Wooski, who came from STL2, known for tracks like Computer's Remix, where his delivery was more like a warning than a song. He was the one people said wasn't just rapping for fun, he was saying names on wax that had already been in police reports, and every time he dropped a verse, folks from both sides paid attention. Even Gakira Barnes, known in the streets as K.I., was getting name dropped in the middle of all this, long after her death in 2014. Because in drill culture, the dead still speak, and the living don't stop talking about them. This wasn't just rap anymore. It was a scoreboard. It was retaliation in rhyme form. It was coded language and open threats and memorials turned into singles. And once the internet picked it up, it went national, then global, with fans from the UK, from Nigeria, from New York, screaming lines that were literally tied to real murders. People who had never stepped foot on St. Lawrence or South King Drive were commenting on who was up, who was down, who got caught lacking, and who slid for who. That spotlight didn't skip over Ambry. Even though she didn't rap, didn't write verses, didn't hold no mic, she was still visible. Folks saw her at FBG Duck video shoots, standing just outside the frame, or sometimes inside, smiling with her hands on her hips, rocking hoodies and jeans like she knew she belonged. She pulled up to shows, took flicks with the crew, and even helped record performances on her phone when nobody else was around to catch the angles. Photos of her started circulating in fan pages, not always with her name tagged, but with captions like Shorty STL, or FBG Lil Sis, or just flame emojis with no context. She became one of those faces that people associated with the side, even if they didn't know what she actually did. That's how drill worked. It didn't matter if you pulled the trigger or just held the phone. If you were seen standing next to a name that meant something, then your name started meaning something too. People started saying Ambry was in the mix, not because she dropped songs, but because she was always close when things popped off. She had been at shows where Wooski got booked, seen in the background of footage from Duck's appearances, and spotted near 63rd when STL tried to make a statement in enemy territory. None of it meant she was plotting, none of it meant she was setting anybody up, but in a scene where perception moves faster than truth, her image became a placeholder for 1,000 assumptions. And as drill kept rising, as O Block and STL turned lyrics into memorials and vice versa, people outside Chicago started tuning in like it was entertainment, forgetting that these were real people, real families, and real funerals. Ambry didn't ask for that kind of attention, but once it landed, it stuck, and there was no way to duck out the spotlight once your face hit the feed. The same camera that caught her smiling also caught the funeral t-shirts, the RIP murals, the black hoodies at candlelight vigils. That's what the drill spotlight did. It lit up the living and the dead the same way. And if your name rang too loud, you ended up getting both sides of the fame. Ambry was caught in that middle space, between being known and being watched, between supporting her people and being accused of things she never said out loud. In a city where clout can kill faster than bullets, Ambry was becoming a name that everybody recognized, even if nobody could tell you exactly why. And in drill culture, that kind of fame comes with a price. Once Ambry's face started showing up in photos with rappers like Duck and Wooski, once her name started sliding into the comment sections of drill fan pages and Facebook recaps, her reputation wasn't hers anymore, it belonged to the internet. What used to be street gossip whispered outside chicken spots and passed around in DM groups now hit a bigger stage, and that stage turned everything into a performance, even pain. In the streets, everybody know what backdooring means, and if you don't, then you're probably not from where she was from. Backdooring is when somebody you trust sets you up, not just sets you up for embarrassment or loss, but for death. It's when you ride in a car with somebody who laughing with you in the front seat, then lets the shooters pull up behind you while your guard is down. It's when you drop your location because you think you're safe, and someone you cool with sends it out like a green light. It's betrayal in its dirtiest form, and in places like STL and O Block, once that label gets put on you, it sticks harder than facts. People started calling Ambry the Backdoor Queen, not because they caught her plotting on camera, not because the streets had real proof, but because she posted a few lyrics, made a few jokes, and moved freely through places most women avoided. It all started around late 2018, after Motor and Side got killed. They were her people, not just on some follower list, but real friends, and she had posted about them heavy. She mourned them, wrote out full posts like prayers, said their names over and over like she was trying to keep their memory alive through Facebook timelines. But some folks didn't believe the tears. They said her grief looked fake. Her words felt off, and from that seed, the rumor started growing. She had liked a couple songs on Instagram, songs that included backdoor references, posted memes about loyalty, quoted some King Von lines, and all of a sudden, people started reading her timeline like it was a confession. They said she set Motor up. They said she lured Side into a trap, and that she played middlewoman between STL and some 051 sets. It didn't matter that nobody saw her on camera at the scene. It didn't matter that her own friends kept riding with her. The story had already taken off. Twitter pages that followed every move in the drill scene were posting things like Ambry always be around when STL drop, or Shorty posted O Block lyrics the night before Motor got hit. Blog pages that didn't even exist before 2017 were uploading slideshows with her photos, asking followers to comment if they thought she was solid or shady. Even Reddit threads started picking it up, mostly written by people hundreds of miles away who had never even seen 63rd Street in real life, but felt bold enough to speak on it like they lived it. And that's where drill culture really turned into something else. Because now it wasn't just between crews, it was being watched and judged like a sport, like some twisted version of fantasy football, where fans placed bets on who would get touched next. You had people in New Jersey, Florida, London, Lagos, and New York arguing about whether Ambry set somebody up off of nothing more than a tweet, a hairstyle, and a blurry screenshot from a concert. What made it worse is that Ambry was a woman moving through male-dominated circles, and in the drill scene, that always comes with side eyes. If she was laughing with the gang, she must be scheming. If she was close to Duck, she must be feeding info to the ops. If she looked good and dressed fly, she must be using her looks to get people lined up. Nobody stopped to think maybe she was just trying to exist around the people she loved. Maybe she just wanted to feel safe with the ones who made her laugh. Maybe she was still grieving Teddy, Motor, and Get Right, all while working 2 jobs to feed a child who was too young to spell his daddy's name. Then came the wildest accusation of all. Somebody said she had something to do with the death of 051 Melly. Now Melly, whose real name was Marlon Monroe, was known citywide for being a high-ranking hitter tied to the 051 Young Money set, and his death in May 2019 had already shocked people because he was one of the few dudes who could walk through multiple turfs without flinching. When Melly got killed, the city felt it, and people were scrambling for answers. Somehow in that chaos, Ambry's name got mentioned, even though she died 4 months before he did. That's how messed up the internet game got. People were saying she set up a hit that happened after she was already buried. But once the lie hit YouTube, it didn't matter. The comment sections kept running with it like it was Bible. They said maybe she gave the drop before she died. Maybe she was tied in with BD girls. Maybe this, maybe that. And every new maybe just added more fuel to a fire she couldn't even defend herself from. People started piecing together her old posts like it was a case file, screenshotting comments from 2016, reading meanings into emojis, claiming that she knew more than she ever let on. Nobody checked in with her real friends. Nobody asked her mom. Nobody looked at the fact that she had never been arrested, never been named by police in any investigation, never been spotted in the middle of a crime scene. It didn't matter. The internet turned her into something she wasn't, a narrative that served their craving for drama and blood and a clean villain in a city full of murky truths. And in doing that, they killed her reputation while her body was still warm. They murdered her name with tweets, with edits, with voiceovers from pages that chase clout off dead kids, then log off like nothing happened. That's what happens when a joke turns into a nickname, and a nickname turns into a storyline, and a storyline becomes more powerful than facts. And once the digital streets pick it up, it spreads like smoke through a window that's always cracked open. Ambry didn't choose to be a character in a drill documentary, but the moment people thought she fit the role, they never gave her the chance to walk off that stage. After the nickname stuck and the internet twisted Ambry into some backdoor mastermind, the real world didn't sit idle and wait for clarity, because in the streets of Chicago, names move faster than evidence, and once somebody starts talking about you like you did something grimy, the block gon' listen, even if they never seen you do nothing with their own eyes. Ambry wasn't charged with anything, wasn't under investigation, and wasn't on no police radar. But once that label floated through St. Lawrence, it created a shadow over her that she couldn't step out of. All it took was presence, just being there, just being in the photos, just laughing with STL, just tagging her location near Eberhart or Indiana, just having mutual friends with people who got hit. She didn't need to be holding no burner. She didn't need to be in the car when it slid. She didn't even need to post anything direct. People filled in the blanks, connected the dots how they wanted, and then acted like the story wrote itself. That's what makes gang culture so slippery, especially when it comes to women. Girls like Ambry, girls like Akira Barnes, who folks used to call K.I. They moved through these circles with confidence, with power, and with ties that made them visible. But visibility don't come with protection. It comes with suspicion, especially when the losses start stacking. K.I. got turned into a legend after she was gone, with people saying she put in work just like the guys. But while she was alive, there were always folks whispering that she was too loud, too deep, too bold for a girl. Ambry didn't carry herself like K.I. didn't flash straps or tweet threats, but even her silence got weaponized once the losses hit too close to her circle. Inside the neighborhood, the silence around her got louder. Nobody pulled up with direct accusations. Nobody walked up to her face and said what they typed online, but the shift was there. Some people started keeping distance. Some started changing how they greeted her. Others just scrolled past her posts without reacting, like they didn't want to be too close if something really came to light. Ambry noticed it too. She said as much in some of her later posts, that people loved you when you made them laugh but ghosted you when you're grieving. That folks prayed for your downfall even when you showed up to every candlelight, every funeral, every court date. And in the middle of all that, nobody with real power stepped in. The city didn't offer any safe space for someone in her position. No hotline to call, no neighborhood meeting where she could say her piece, no mental health counselor pulling her aside after motor or side got dropped to ask how she was sleeping at night. This system wasn't built to help someone like her. It was built to disappear people like her quietly, under layers of blame and poverty and hopelessness, until the obituary was the only thing left with her name on it. When people talk about Chicago violence, they love to zoom in on gang wars and body counts, but they never talk enough about the vacuum those kids are moving in. Ambry was trying to raise a son on fast food wages, taking 2 buses just to get to Popeyes on 103rd, then doubling back to clock in at McDonald's, like her body wasn't already carrying the weight of 10 funerals. She didn't have a therapist. She didn't have a clean break away from the neighborhood. She didn't have a cousin with a guest room in Bolingbrook, or a savings account with a cushion big enough to skip work for a week when it got too heavy to breathe. Instead, she had Facebook. She had timeline posts where she could talk to ghosts. She had inboxes full of half-hearted check-ins and emojis. She had a name that people whispered and watched, hoping she would slip so they could say I knew it out loud. But what she didn't have was a net, and when you're moving that close to the edge, every rumor feels like another finger pushing you off. The thing about women in the drill scene is that they never get to just exist. They always have to justify their place, always walking a tightrope between being loyal and being labeled, between loving your crew and being blamed when they get touched. When a man moves freely between sets, people call him plugged in. They say he's solid. But when a woman like Ambry does the same thing, they say she's sneaky. They say she probably backdooring folks. They say watch her close. Nobody ever pulled receipts. Nobody ever dropped screenshots that proved anything, but the streets don't wait for proof. They move on energy, and if the energy fell off, even for a minute, then your safety, your loyalty, your whole name is on trial, with no judge, no lawyer, and no defense. That's what Ambry was up against. And what made it hit harder is that when all this was happening, there wasn't no outrage for her. Nobody marched when she started getting treated different. Nobody spoke out to defend her publicly when the blogs started speculating. Nobody posted her face next to the word misunderstood, the way they do for others when it's too late. She was just another girl from STL trying to keep her head above water. And the people around her watched her drown slow while the internet cheered. When a community won't speak up and the system won't step in, you're left with nothing but your name. And once your name starts trending for the wrong reasons, it's already too late to snatch it back. That's what happened to Ambry, a girl who stood too close to too many flames and got burned by a fire she didn't even start. By the time January 24th, 2019 rolled around, Ambry had been holding on with everything she had, clocking into Popeyes during the day and McDonald's at night, hopping buses across the South Side, dodging cold wind and side eyes while keeping that same tired smile for her coworkers who didn't know half of what she carried in her chest. That Thursday night, she wrapped up her shift like usual, told folks she was heading out, didn't make a big scene, didn't move like somebody who felt a target on their back, just another day in the life of a young mom trying to get by. At some point before 2:30 a.m., she got into a white pickup truck, a vehicle people later said she recognized because Ambry wasn't the type to hop in random cars, not in that part of the city, not with her name ringing the way it was. Witnesses would later say they heard her arguing with someone, not shouting wild, but loud enough to catch attention from behind closed blinds, like two people who knew each other too well and were fed up past the point of holding it in. The truck didn't stop in a main lot or pull into a gas station. It rolled to a slow halt in a dark alley off the 10700 block of South Eberhart, a stretch that don't got no cameras, barely got working lights, and don't see many feet once the sun goes down. Then the shots rang out, not 3 or 4 like some warning, but 12 sharp cracks that echoed so quick they didn't even sound like arguments anymore, just punctuation marks at the end of something that was already broken. Folks in nearby homes ducked low, some peeking out through blinds, others pulling their phones out to call it in. By the time CPD arrived, it was already over. Her body was laid out cold on the concrete, her hoodie soaked through, her pulse long gone, and the pickup truck she got into was gone like it never existed in the first place. The official report from the police said she was found around 2:35 a.m., shot multiple times in the chest, left in that alley with no ID on her and no one beside her. The only real evidence left behind were the shell casings, the statements from half-shook neighbors who didn't want to get too involved, and a city that had already lost count of how many girls had been gunned down with no answers. Her body was pronounced at the scene, not the hospital, because there wasn't even time to try saving her. It didn't take long before the blogs and street pages caught wind of it. The news hadn't even hit the papers yet when Instagram started flooding with comments like, "Backdoor Queen got backdoored," and "That's what happens when you set up the wrong ones." Some folks didn't even wait for confirmation. They started tagging her in posts like they had been waiting on it, like it was just another episode in a show they never missed. The jokes weren't funny to the people who knew her, but the internet got a short memory and a long appetite for drama. Theories came out quick, way faster than facts. Some said it was a domestic situation, said maybe she had been seeing somebody low-key and it went sideways, maybe an argument turned deadly in a moment of heat. Others said it was a hit, straight retaliation from people who believed the backdoor rumors and wanted to make sure she never did it again. Then there were those who swore it was random, a setup by someone outside the usual beefs, someone who just took advantage of her being tired, alone, and out the way. One theory that caught on heavy was that she had been killed by someone from STL itself, a personal fallout that led to her getting lined up by the same crew she stood beside for years. Others said it had to be someone from 051 Young Money, possibly tying it to the earlier deaths of Motor Inside, trying to say she had been involved in something deeper than what most folks saw. Nobody agreed on a motive, but everybody swore they knew the shooter, dropping initials and vague comments without ever saying names. But police didn't move off any of those theories. They put out the standard statement, said they were investigating, said they had no suspects and no arrests had been made, and then the case fell quiet like most Southside shootings do. They said the witnesses weren't talking, said the lack of camera footage made it hard to trace the pickup, and by February, the story had already started to fade from the public radar. Ambri's family didn't accept any of the rumors. Her cousin Sheila House told Fox 10 she was a hardworking mother who never involved herself in things that could get her killed. Said she was working 2 jobs, raising her son Angelo by herself, and never once mentioned feeling unsafe. She said the stories going around didn't match the girls she knew. Said they were just internet noise made by people who never checked on Ambri when she was alive. Sheila described her as loving, loud and focused, someone who always put her son first, even when the world kept throwing loss after loss at her. But still, the questions lingered. If she didn't do anything, then why was she targeted? If it wasn't retaliation, then why so many bullets? If it was someone she trusted, then who was the driver of that pickup truck? And why haven't they been named? Those were the questions that circled around the people who loved her, the same way smoke circles over a burned-out shell of something that used to be full of life. The alley where she died got no flowers placed down, no mural painted over the bricks, no press conference begging for justice. It just got cold again and quiet again and swallowed her name like it does too many names on that side of the city. And even though her people kept her memory alive through old photos, reposted statuses, and throwback videos from better days, it was hard not to feel like her death was already being filed under unsolved and forgotten. The same way too many young black women's deaths get treated when the streets start spinning louder than the truth. Ambri didn't see it coming, at least not in that exact moment. And if she did, she didn't run, didn't flinch, didn't post a goodbye. She just left work like any other night, got in that car like she had before, and ended up in a place where only shadows and rumors remembered her name by morning. By the time the sun came up over Roseland on January 25, 2019, Ambri's body had already been zipped, bagged, and removed, but her name was just getting started on another kind of ride, the kind where her story got chopped up, remixed, reposted, turned into content, flipped into memes, and fed back to a city that didn't know how to mourn without commentary. At the same time, a little boy named Angelo, only 4 years old, woke up to a world where both his parents were gone. First his daddy Teddy Gage from cancer just months earlier, and now his mama, the one person who had been fighting every day to keep him steady. They called him Lolo, said he looked just like his mama, said he had her eyes, her attitude, and her same goofy little grin when he got excited. Folks close to the family said Ambri never went a day without talking about him, posting him, calling him her little broke best friend, Not because she was mocking him, but because she loved him so deep it showed in how she gave everything she had to that boy. Now, all of a sudden, Lolo was left in a world where people said his mama was a setup girl and his daddy was another statistic, and he didn't have no say in none of that. Cousin Sheila House was one of the first to speak publicly, telling Fox 10 that Ambry was a hardworking girl who didn't deserve what happened, that she loved her son, worked 2 jobs, stayed out the way, and was only caught in the crossfire of a city that refuses to protect his daughters. Sheila said Ambry was known, loved, and respected, not just for the people she stood next to, but for the way she stood on her own, even when the city was crumbling around her. While the family grieved, the internet did what it always does, split into pieces, turned cruel, got loud with theories, and silent with sympathy. Some folks posted tribute clips of Ambry dancing at block parties, smiling outside corner stores, or holding her son during better days, while others flooded the comments with trash, writing things like, "She got what she gave," or "That backdoor energy always spins the block." Her name became more than just a name. It became a conversation starter, a warning, a punchline, and a headline, depending on who was speaking and who they wanted to impress. Every reposted picture of her on Twitter came with side eyes and quote tweets, people debating whether she was innocent or guilty, whether she loved too hard or moved too messy, all while forgetting that a child now had to carry the weight of all those stories without even knowing what any of them meant. Lolo didn't have no say in the Facebook comments. He didn't get to defend his mama in YouTube videos. He was just a little boy with 2 missing faces at the dinner table and a city that didn't even blink when his whole world collapsed. People love to talk about legacy, about how names live on, but in Ambry's case, her legacy got hijacked and rebranded before her body even hit the funeral home. Her name became a meme, her story became a lesson, and instead of being remembered as a mother who worked doubles, who stood by her people, who danced through grief and pain, she became a warning to the next girl who dared to stand too close to the flame without flinching. And in all that noise, Lolo's future sits on shaky ground. They said he might stay with his grandmother, but who knows how long that kind of setup can really hold in a city where resources run thin and trauma lives in every hallway. There won't be no blueprint for how he navigates the world, hearing stories about his mama that don't match the pictures on the wall, growing up in a place that already labels black boys before they finish preschool, and now doing it with both of his parents etched into RIP posts and court whispers. Ambry didn't get the closure she deserved, and Lolo didn't get the peace he needed. And while the city keeps moving, while new names take over the headlines, the aftermath stays stuck in that boy's life, in his silence, in his questions, in the long nights where no answer makes sense, and no bedtime story fixes what was taken too fast, too loud, and too unfair. After the dust settled and the posts stopped coming, Ambry's name didn't just disappear, it transformed, not into justice or clarity, but into something more confusing, more permanent, something that lived in comment sections and drill playlists, in whispered warnings and hashtag debates. Her story got swallowed by the streets and served back up in pieces, each person holding a different version, each platform pushing their own angle, until the real Ambry became hard to find under all the noise. People started comparing her to Gakira K.I. Barnes, not because their stories were the same, but because the streets love patterns and symmetry, and both of them were Southside girls, both wrapped up in STL sets, both pulled into the war by association and survival. K.I. had earned her name with bodies and bullets, and people called her a shooter, a savage, a soldier. Ambry didn't carry that rep. She didn't pull triggers. She didn't post threats. She didn't claim anything more than loyalty to her people. But once she got that nickname, Backdoor Queen, her reputation started spinning in the same orbit as K.I.'s, built on myth, sharpened by rumors, and passed around like a mixtape with no label. That's how urban legends get made in Chicago. They don't start with facts, they start with fragments, an Instagram post, a blurry picture, a misread lyric, a half-heard story. Then the fans and bloggers and fake page runners come in to fill the gaps, and in the drill scene, the dead get talked about more than the living. So once your name hits that level, there's no turning it down. Ambry became a symbol, not a person, a story people used to explain things they couldn't prove, a cautionary tale told in DMs and comment threads by people who never even met her. Meanwhile, the systems that were supposed to catch her, guide her, help her find a way out, never showed up. Chicago had already failed too many girls like Ambry by the time she was even born. Schools underfunded, clinics under-resourced, housing stacked up and falling apart, streets lined with names of boys who died too young, and corners with candles that get replaced before they even melt all the way down. People talked about her as if she had a choice, but forgot that real choices cost money, time, and safety, all things she barely had. She didn't grow up thinking she would be a name on a YouTube title. She didn't raise her son expecting to have her name trend under setup girl hashtags. She worked, she cried, she stood outside holding tears back during too many funerals. She stayed up after shifts to scroll through photos of friends who were already dead before 20. And even when the rumors got loud, even when people turned their backs, she never went online to clear her name, never clapped back in the way most would expect, like maybe she thought staying silent was the only thing she could control. Ambri's life wasn't a headline. It was a series of days spent walking through heat and snow just to bring home food for her son. It was the long bus rides across the South Side. It was the 2 uniforms she rotated between. It was the friends she buried one by one. It was the smiles she kept giving even when her eyes looked heavy. It was the voicemail she left someone just days before she died, saying she was tired, but still trying. When people bring up her name now, they say things like, "It was bound to happen," or "She knew too much," or "She moved funny," as if being around people who got targeted means you asked for the bullets too. But if you pull back the layers, if you take out the edits and cut out the music, what's left is a girl who got caught in a machine she didn't build, who played no bigger role than being visible, loud, and loyal. And maybe that's the saddest part of the whole story. Not just that she died, not just that no one was arrested, but that even in death, people keep choosing the version of Ambri that fits their narrative, instead of sitting with the truth that she was never proven guilty of anything but being too close, too often, to people the city had already marked for destruction. The legend of the Backdoor Queen still floats online, still gets quoted, still used as shorthand for betrayal and revenge. But behind that label was a girl with a baby, a job, and a heart that was breaking long before her body ever hit the ground. And if her story teaches anything, it's not just about loyalty or survival, it's about how easy it is for a city to lose a girl like Ambri, and how hard it is to bring her back once her name belongs to everyone but herself.